do you think that we'll end up in a very multi-chain ecosystem?
We don't think that it's going to be a single chain to rule them all. You'll probably have one that is very dominant. There'll probably be a power law distribution of how it's used.
Good afternoon. What's popping, guys? Today we have another episode here on the BlockHash Podcast with Alejo, co-founder of the Pontem Network, here to talk about their powerhouse product development studio, building products with Move and Aptos and others, L1s. It's going to be a very exciting episode today. Alejo, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Likewise. Best way to kick it off, I guess, would be to, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your backstory? How'd you end up with Pontem Network, but also, just generally in Web3?
Yeah, I discovered Bitcoin back in 2014 and went down the rabbit hole of having a sovereign form of money. I brought it to one of my professors in school, and he mentioned that technologically it was very simple, very straightforward, but the fact that from a game theory perspective, you have these adversarial parties that are maintaining monetary value of an intangible object, just bits of information, was really interesting. And, he encouraged me to keep looking at it. So continued down that rabbit hole, 2014 through, graduating college. Luckily, set up recurring buys back then. And when I left college, went into IBM, more traditional tech company, worked at the corporate level in growth, then transitioned into the blockchain division, where I got to lead growth for IBM blockchain and seeing how blockchain was being adopted by large enterprises, specifically corporations like Walmart, large banks doing pilots around trade finance or supply chain tracking. And what was really interesting, and I think about blockchain, is that it's a fundamentally coordinating technology. Again, thinking about how the technology is relatively simple, but you have these adversarial parties coordinating on a database or a ledger. And I think there's still use cases for permission blockchains, and we'll see that develop in parallel to permissionless blockchains. But really in crypto, where you don't need to ask permission to start using this technology, to start integrating into protocols like USDC, for example, to enable access worldwide to a stable currency that's dollar denominated. This is where I think a lot of the value is going to get unlocked, and we're seeing that happen today. After IBM, I jumped into crypto, looked at the space. The Move ecosystem was really interesting because as EVM has a monopoly over existing infrastructure, Ethereum obviously a dominant player. It was interesting that we're still in such a nascent part of the technology development arc. So if we look at something like cloud computing, very early on, you had obviously on-prem servers. So IBM, again, was a powerhouse in delivering on-prem servers. But as a public cloud started to develop this technology that allowed people to just essentially host servers elsewhere, not having to pay a lot, just to bootstrap simple infrastructure, had a lot of the same issues that we're seeing today in early blockchain. The main one that we're going to be tackling right now is this idea of vendor lock-in. So public cloud infrastructure, there's various vendors, AWS, Google Cloud, IBM, etc. But on the onset of the Kubernetes and Docker technology to containerize applications and allow you to essentially be able to easily port them or have multi-cloud deployments, that really gave the whole industry a boom, given that people were no longer vendor locked into an individual cloud provider to your on-prem services. So very similarly in blockchain, we're seeing that people are vendor locked in based on the language or the virtual machine that they're using. On Ethereum, that's the EVM. On Solana, that's the Solana virtual machine, etc. So on Aptos and Sui, it's Move. And we think that the technology and the industry has to mature so developers can come in and just build with any language that they like to build with, and being able to deploy across multiple blockchains in a very, very similar vein as being able to deploy across multiple clouds. On Web2 public cloud deployments, you think about redundancy, uptime for your applications, for your users. Obviously, you don't want to be stuck if a vendor has increased costs or just has a lot of downtime on their servers. In crypto, what's really interesting is that the reason you want to deploy with multiple cloud providers is because the native assets that people hold that hold value, let's say ETH or Sol, even though they're used as gas for these public blockchains to pay for compute credits, they hold value and are not only a unit of account, but a store of value for people that, they use to invest or, are holding to reinvest into other assets through DeFi. So unless applications, let's say like a Uniswap, is able to offer their users access to all those assets that live across multiple chains, users would just go elsewhere. They'll start using other applications. So we've seen this very clearly in the EVM space, where Uniswap, Aave are able to deploy across multiple chains. If you go on DeFi Llama, you'll see Uniswap is deployed across 20 chains, including L2s and L1s like AVA, like BNB, Ethereum, Optimism, Arbitrum, etc. However, applications built with these alternative VMs, let's say Radium as an equivalent, are vendor locked in or stuck within Solana. So what we want to enable is the ability for them to go both ways. So if you built out with Solana or you built out with Move, you should be able to also deploy onto existing L2s and other L1s to offer your end users those native assets like ETH, Sol, BTC, TON, etc. So yeah, I think we're still very early, and we started out building applications on Aptos with the Move technology, and very successful there. We have the top AMM, the top wallet, but again, we're vendor locked in the sense that because we built with Move, we can't easily port our application to Solana or to any of the Ethereum L2s. So talking to other developers, talking to other teams, we saw this as a huge opportunity essentially to solve this problem for the whole industry, and yeah, offer a solution that just allows developers to deploy with any of the languages that they prefer or that they've already started building with. This way, they don't have to maintain various teams, maintain different code bases, which incurs technical debt. As you improve your code or make upgrades, you're having to do that across multiple virtual machines. And yeah, we think that the future is going to look a lot like what traditional tech or Web2 looks like. You're going to have applications deployed across multiple clouds or multiple chains. And what we're building with this new product called Lumio is essentially the ability for teams to do that, to just maintain one code base, pick the language that they see best for their use case or that their developers like building with, whether it's Rust, which gives you a lot of freedom, expressibility, also performance and safety improvements, or Move, which is kind of like Solidity, but also like Rust, that has a framework that puts guardrails on blockchain development, or EVM, because there's already a network effect of already built applications and code. And so yeah, we just want to give developers freedom to build with the language that they want and make that accessible across all the L2s and L1s where we can integrate.
What is Lumio exactly? Why is it helpful for developers? What's different about it?
Yeah, so what we're doing with Lumio is essentially integrating into the existing L2s on Ethereum, these different virtual machines. So most L2s, let's say OP mainnet base, have already the EVM integrated. It's kind of like the common framework. So what we want to do is integrate currently SVM and MoveVM, and then vice versa, and other L1s where there isn't already L2 ecosystems, deploy our own L2s that have these virtual machines integrated. So you can think of Lumio as a framework for virtual machines, and then we're deploying it as L2s onto existing L2 federations to have interoperability and shared security through likely shared sequencers, or where there isn't already a sequencer, essentially bootstrapping an L2 and having it be compatible with these virtual machines. The reason we decided to do this is, and the way that we did it was by integrating into the existing tech stacks, is so that developers have the composability and shared security and liquidity of existing L2 federations. So if people are familiar with the L2 ecosystems on Ethereum, there's Optimism, Arbitrum, and right now they're isolated. Even within an ecosystem like Optimism, where we consume in, Base is isolated from OP mainnet, as isolated from Mantle. But the idea is to bring them together into a federation that has interoperability, has a shared security layer, shared bridge, shared sequencer. And this is likely going to start going live very, very soon, probably first half of 2025. And we're going to see these federations of L2 start to interoperate. So you'll have composability between Base and OP mainnet, Mantle, etc. And then similar within Arbitrum, They're calling it the Orbits framework. And this looks a lot like Cosmos or Polkadot, which were alternative architectures for blockchains, which were built as different L1s. Those same ideas of having interoperability across, kind of like servers, which L2s are just off-chain computers that then settle back into an L1. Is coming and being developed on the L2s, where you have a lot more freedom on how you architect this technology to essentially scale. And it makes a lot of sense because you can think of each L2 as a server on one state computer. So you're horizontally scaling your computer or your servers. If you think about it from like an AWS perspective, by horizontally adding more computers. So each L2 in itself is a computer, and now you need like a common framework. On Optimism, they call it the superchain. And again, it's building out with the OP stack, and then using similar technology for the fraud proofs, for challenging those fraud proofs, so that essentially you can run on the same framework. Any upgrades that happen are communal, and there's no mismatch as these are evolving. And the way that we've seen Ethereum develop, I think we'll have these like zones of sovereignty where, for example, the super chain, which are all built with the OP stack, will share similar technology, will share similar upgrade paths. They'll have very close interoperation. So you could do like synchronous transactions possibly, which means doing contract calls that have no lag. Similarly, within Orbits, in Arbitrum, you'll see a similar ecosystem develop. And then I think you'll still have what we have today, which is third-party bridges or third-party, be like intents, enabling interoperability across these, like zones or federations of L2. So what we're building is integrating into these existing zones or federations so that teams can essentially deploy and have composability, shared liquidity, shared security with Optimism or Arbitrum, be compatible there, as opposed to bootstrapping another zone that's sovereign and independent from each of these. And obviously on L1s like Solana, these zones don't exist. So we're just bootstrapping our own and encouraging other teams to come and join and share our framework for interoperability.
You mentioned Move VM a few times, in comparison to something like Solidity, with Ethereum and, their dominance over the dApp space over the many, many years. What maybe separates Move VM or makes it better or maybe more flexible than something like Solidity?
Yeah, so Move is designed after Rust. It uses a resource model that's very similar. Rust is a program that has static type. So things like, very specifically, one of the biggest advantages is you don't have dynamic dispatch. Dynamic dispatch has led to re-entrancy errors even to this day on Ethereum. So it's a framework designed after Rust. But if you're familiar with Rust, a lot of people have probably heard this analogy of building on Solana, that it's like chewing glass. So Rust is, very expressive. You can get to the same outcomes in a variety of different ways. Move is more frameworked, so that essentially you have guardrails. It looks a lot like Solidity, so very similar to like a TypeScript language. So you can intuitively build out applications with logic that is more abstracted than let's say like a lower level language like Rust. So even though it uses a lot of the same design elements of Rust, it has these guardrails so that you can essentially, for example, easily move assets without copying or deleting them. There's also like standard libraries so that you can easily pull in, similar to like an ERC20 contract, the coin contract that everybody uses. So it's the same. So I think the best way to describe it is Move is almost like a mix between Rust and Solidity, where you take the best of both worlds. Solidity, people like it for it being really intuitive and easy to understand. But again, due to not being like a low level language that was built for, for interacting with servers, then you get some of the issues like, for example, the dynamic dispatch would lead to reentrancy errors. Move also has another benefit, is that it has a built-in prover. So you can do formal verification natively within the virtual machine without relying on third-party libraries. So you can definitely do formal verification with EVM. but you're still relying on a third-party library. Formal verification essentially means that you specify what outputs you want from the code, and then you check that output is what you're expecting. And then, if it is what you're expecting, then it goes through it. If it's not, then it'll revert. So yeah, that's built in natively into Move. So essentially, it's like an iterative improvement on languages, and it's more convenient to use and has more of these performance and safety features built in. Another big one is performance. It natively does parallel transaction execution, or the way that it does that is so there's two types of parallelized transaction execution. So one is optimistic concurrency and one is pessimistic concurrency. Pessimistic concurrency is what the Solana virtual machine uses. And in pessimistic concurrency, you essentially have to predefine which memory you're going to access. So you have to essentially say in the instruction set when you're specifying the code, I'm going to be accessing this account. So you almost like freeze it to make sure that that's not accessed by any other transactions that are running, and you can run these transactions in parallel, given that these won't collude, or these transactions won't collude, and there won't be an issue as you're accessing the same memory. On optimistic concurrency, you don't have to pre-specify which memory you're going to access. So the code just runs, and if there's collusions or there's points where you're accessing the same memory, then it'll just rerun it so that there isn't collusions, and it'll keep going. So there's pros and cons to each, but essentially it's an opposite to Solidity and the EVM, where you essentially have sequential transaction execution. You're able to run transactions that don't collude in parallel, which also gives you performance improvements.
What are some of the other products? I know you guys got a product suite filled with different stuff that's on the Pontem network, like Liquidswap, for example, or the Pontem Wallet. So what are some of those things that stand out that you think are important for people to know when they're coming to Pontem for the first time? Some flagship products for you guys.
We've built out 3 core products. The one we've been talking about is Lumio. That's an infrastructure product. And these are, the way that I think about it is that they're vertically integrated. So any Web 2 application is going to have a front end or an interface. It's going to have business logic, and it's going to have backend servers. What we've essentially done is done a vertically integrated tech stack for Web 3, built out Lumio, which again is the backend implementation. Liquidswap is the business logic for one of the most widely used DeFi protocols, which is a swap, built with Move. And then the wallet is a front-end interface, so people can interact with the blockchain, can interact with this business logic, with these programs and business logic that are running on Lumio, which again, you can think about as like the back-end infrastructure, the computers. We built out 3 products, each covering a layer of the stack. This gives us the benefit of also understanding their interactions as we're building each of these products, which the subsequent layers of the stack, either the front-end interface or what goes below it. And being able to understand the friction points and build better products and better interfaces for others to integrate or use. So having built out these 3 products, I think gives us definitely a good overview of what developers and end users are running into.
Awesome. What are some other things that you're seeing developers start to build on the Pontem network? Like, is it pretty agnostic in terms of like the types of stuff they want to build, or or is there like a certain niche of things being built, like within DeFi or NFTs or AI or something like that?
Yeah, it's agnostic. We're targeting established companies or players that want to continue expanding to other ecosystems. So as new ecosystems pop up, it's a general trend that you'll see a new wave of applications popping up. XL2 has and AMM credit protocol, etc. We obviously those folks are welcome. If they want to come in and start anew, that's definitely welcome. But just from our business development efforts, we're targeting established companies. So we're looking for existing players in the EVM and Solana VM and the Move space, and helping them expand into these other ecosystems, so they can go up against incumbents like a Uniswap or an Aave, or incumbents can go and compete on Solana or Aptos. So that's been the target, and covers the whole breadth of DeFi, gaming, some deep in projects, AI projects, etc. So or essentially looking to target existing projects to help them expand.
Do you guys have like any resources or a directory or anything educational for developers as well? Like they're coming to Pontem for the first time. Is there like a hub or a place for them to go to kind of get up to speed on what they can do and build?
So we've actually built out what's called the Move Playground, and developers can essentially start building applications directly in the browser without having to download without having to download and set up a local environment. So that's really useful for people that just want to start initially building with Move. If people Google the Move Playground, it'll come up. It's very similar. Forgetting the name of the Ethereum thing. Oh yeah, Remix, the Remix ID. So that's like fully on the browser. That's one place where developers can go and start building with Move, and essentially, not having to set up a local environment. In the future, if we have the resources, we can expand that to Solana VM as well and EVM.
Do you guys have a community where people can kind of get together and share ideas, help each other out?
Yeah, definitely. In our Telegram or Discord, that can be active. People are more technical. They can reach out to us directly. I know that some of these are definitely not as technical. So if people are technical, want to explore these, definitely reach out directly.
What about your guys' roadmap, going into the rest of this year, into next year? Do you guys have anything that's publicly available in terms of where you guys might be going for events or new updates or new things being launched on the network that you think people should be aware of?
Yeah, well, we're going to likely be at Breakpoint and Token 2049. So if people are out there, definitely feel free to reach out. We're also recently deployed Solana. So the two ecosystems we're targeting as a proof of concept is Optimism and Solana. And we're going to have very soon Moves, SVM, and EVM available on both. So, if you're building with any of these languages or virtual machines, and you want to go to either Optimism or Solana, come talk to us. We really want to work with teams to help us, again, iron out specifically what their needs and requirements are, so we can, cater that and expand that and scale it to more teams. So, that's going to be our area of focus, those two ecosystems and those three virtual machines.
Last question, but kind of also a little high level as well, kind of taking what Pontem Network is doing well and expanding it, I guess, on the space. Like you mentioned earlier with Ethereum having quite a stranglehold on the dApp market for so long, and like almost like a monopoly essentially. And you were starting to see that slowly diffuse into other blockchain ecosystems. But there's still like the de facto blockchain to go to, and that's starting to slowly change. But do you think that we'll end up in a very multi-chain ecosystem in the future, and the benefits of that, Pontem Network playing into that, how do you think it'll have a role in influencing that kind of future?
Yeah, exactly. We don't think that it's going to be a single chain to rule them all. You'll probably have one that is very dominant, and there'll probably be a power law distribution of how it's used. So we can again look at the traditional cloud infrastructure space for something like that, where you see AWS as an early entrant dominating, but obviously others like Google Cloud still having a good market share. Microsoft, Azure, Microsoft definitely. We'll probably see, like Solana and Ethereum being like the AWS and Azure, where there's a power law distribution of people using it, and then you'll have a long tail of others that are still in the market. What's interesting about crypto is that these are aligned with these native assets that hold value, and as these things get adopted, and they do have different value propositions. So, for example, Solana obviously has cheaper and higher throughput, lower latency transactions than Ethereum. So for use cases, maybe like gaming, deepen, where you do need these, faster, cheaper transactions. And, if these get widely adopted, then we'll probably see a boost in Solana adoption. For other applications, maybe more financial applications where you need to be more conservative, you need 100% uptime, so that's one downside to Solana's scalability, is that it oftentimes goes down. And if you have, let's say, financial infrastructure like ETFs, real world assets on chain, you probably want to have that in a more conservative blockchain like Ethereum, where it has 100% uptime. As these different use cases get adopted, I think we'll see players that are leading in the specific verticals get adopted, and then we'll see a long tail of these. And that makes us perfectly positioned to help teams essentially deploy across the different ecosystems that are adopted.
You also mentioned earlier, there being a place for permission chains as well, alongside a decentralized ecosystem. Do you think legacy Web2 companies, whether, large or small, would want to, build on Pontem Network as well? Or do you think that they'd want to build out something permission and consolidated, like within their own network or their own chain? Like, do you see that potential for Pontem Network maybe attract some of those corporate institutional players?
Yeah, so the way that we're building out the technology is a framework similar to the OP stack or Arbitrum Orbit. So if a player does want to come and deploy permission L2, that's definitely there, and we're happy to help them. There's definitely use cases for this, and what's cool about this infrastructure is that you can have almost like a permission bubble that's still interoperable with the rest of the permissionless internet. So you can think, I think USDC is one really good example of, even though it's not its own L2, of an application that's permission, where in the code itself, if let's say there was a hack and USDC as a central authority wanted to freeze certain coins, it could, or certain accounts, it could. So similarly, teams are going to want more, teams, as you were saying, traditional tech companies are going to want more control over what they can do. And an application is one where, again, you have control over maybe accounts that hold those coins. You can freeze them. But as you've probably noticed, they can't really freeze like a protocol. Like, if someone deposits USDC into Uniswap, they can't just deposit the Uniswap. Sorry, they can't just freeze the Uniswap pool. So potentially this could be a use case where, let's say a bank wants to run an exchange. Just having the assets on the exchange being permission isn't enough. They might want the whole application, or maybe the whole environment and other applications that interact with it, and being able to have central control authorities that can, freeze assets. And again, these assets can, in these chains, maybe you can have interoperability with existing, fully permissionless applications. But yeah, it'll be interesting how it nets out, and based on the requirements. I think we'll see teams and, again, companies kind of testing the waters on what can be done and seeing whether that gets traction, gets the actual composability that gives the network effects of these applications get adopted. And maybe they'll do it in a company with regulators that help them set what those requirements should be. So like one really good use case would be like attestations for accounts that, have gone through KYC, so they have no limits on what they can do. And then maybe accounts that have not gone through KYC, have limits on how much they can transfer, can be like $1,000 or something to kind of like mitigate risk. So yeah, all of that I think is at the edge of what can be done with this. I think, fully permissionless, kind of like no rules crypto will always exist. I don't see Bitcoin and Ethereum having these permission controls by the nature of its beginnings and kind of like the value proposition that these bring. But I think there's a place for these types of applications that can still coexist with everything that's permissionless and fully free and open.
Alejo, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and really highlight what you guys are doing with Pontem. I think you guys are doing some excellent stuff. Where can people go to learn more? Obviously, there's the website, but do you want to direct them towards any of their communities or documentation in particular?
Yeah, follow us on X, Pontem Network, and Lumio FDN. Join our Discord and Telegram. You can find them from the X profiles. And yeah, come be a part, follow what we're doing, and feel free to actually reach out directly. People have questions or they're interested.
Awesome. And then can they reach out to you on any of those mediums as well if they want to get in contact?
Yeah, definitely. On X, I'm Sadogi Nakamoto, Sadogee, and then Nakamoto.
Awesome. Alejo, thank you for taking the time, man. Really appreciate it. Let's do it again soon.
Awesome. Thank you.